Hey everybody, it's Scotty from Scotty's Record Shop with an artist profile, and right from the get-go here, I'm going to apologize. This is going to take some time, and it's of a group that you wouldn't think it would take a lot of time doing, because in America they release, what, 10 albums or something, if that? Why would it take a half an hour? I'm praying it doesn't take a half an hour for everybody's sake, but I have a lot of stuff to show you from the Little River Band, one of my favorite bands of all time. At least a certain period of time in their career makes them one of my favorite bands of all time. A really brief history, and also what spawned this was people have talked about grails. I hate that term. I don't know. I've never liked that term, a grail. But records that I recently got some stuff from Australia from a friend that finally was like, okay, I got to make a video of this stuff. I've got so much Little River Band from all around the world. It's just time to make a video, so I apologize again for the length of this, but this ought to be kind of fun. If you're a Little River Band fan, this is going to be mind-blowing probably for you. Okay, just 2-second introduction to Little River Band, very popular in the mid-70s up until the early 80s here in America. They were actually a supergroup, like Cream, like Blind Faith, like Asia. And the funny thing is they were a supergroup to the people in Australia because some of the members came from bands like Axiom, Mississippi, Zoot, all these great bands that people outside of Australia really had never heard of. Just a quick note, okay, for you Beatle fans, a little mission for you. Look up Eleanor Rigby, the Beatles song Eleanor Rigby by the band Zoot. You will never think of that song in the same way again, and you'll never think of Rick Springfield the same way again, because it was Rick Springfield on lead vocals. That was back in 1970 when Springfield was just a baby, just a young guy. But there was also a member of Little River Band in Zoot as well. Mississippi. These were all great, bands from Australia that did really well in Australia, but didn't do anything really outside of Australia. These guys got together in 1975. They decided to record a single. They decided to record the Everly Brothers' When Will I Be Loved for their debut big hit single. The only problem was when they did that, right at the same time Linda Ronstadt issued her version of it, and so even though it was recorded, it would end up being issued on an album in 1988 of rarities and unreleased stuff. A great version, and it's in America. It's on a double CD collection, which is nice. They do a nice version of it. But let's get into this stuff. This is going to take a little bit. Again, I apologize for the length of time, but I got to do it right. I love these guys. I hate the word grail, but this is one of these, just got sent to me. Little River Band's first LP got issued in Australia with a different cover than the cover that everybody else remembers. This was the cover. Anybody has any information on why this cover, gatefold as well, why the cover was changed, please let me know. I have no idea. This is on, I won't show you every single one of them, but EMI Australia. They did switch covers, and I'll show you that next cover. This was 1975. It's a Long Way There. It's such a great song. That was this big hit off of this, or a hit in America. Little River Band starting their career off. Of course, I have like 3 other versions of this to show you. This is the American pressing. A little beat up. I've had this for a long time. This is the cover that eventually it would be switched to. This one is on Harvest. There's your inner sleeve. There you go on the Harvest label. A great album. Track listing and everything is the same. But I really would like to know why the cover was changed. I don't know if it was because there was a lot of band member changes in this group. Look up on Wikipedia and just see there's the graph of all the people that have been through this band. It was kind of ridiculous. But one more copy of this album to show you. This is, I believe this would end up being a UK repress of this. And I'll show you the one time I didn't know. Same cover. Different inner sleeve though. And this is your label. On Fame label. I think at one time I didn't know that what this was I'm thinking it's a UK reissue of the album. Great album. Now we're going to get into one of the weirdest, kind of confusing. You may have to run this video a couple of times back just to catch exactly how confusing this can be at times. Their next couple of albums. The next album that they issued in Australia was an album called After Hours. This is a promotional copy, actually, that I got years and years and years ago. Here's your back cover. This is a great album. I mean, their diversity musically on this album. There was one song, Bourbon Street, which sounded really a lot like Little Feat. And yet there's stuff on here that's quite country. You know, Sweet Old Fashioned Man. And there's stuff on here that's very typical poppy. There's your EMI, again, label. EMI Australia. This album, because of when it came out, was kind of overlooked by America because the American public was still trying to push their first album. It's because it got here a little later. It got here in '76 when this album came out. And so we didn't initially get this album. This is a, I want to say like a Holland. Again, I knew where this was at one time. Repress of this. Different cover. Same track listing as the other album. And I'll show you the label on this. It's on a very interesting, yeah. This is just a really, really good album. Now I think it's available on iTunes in its original form. It's going to start getting confusing. Don't forget this album, After Hours. We're coming back to it in a little bit. The next album in Australia was this one. Great album. Damate's Cocktail. Right here. I'm going to make sure that I've got the right pressing of this. Yes, I do. Track listing on this is not the track listing that we're used to here in America. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But this is also on EMI. This took me a long time. This is one of these that a friend of mine just sent me. I was like, oh, so happy to have this finally on vinyl. This is the first of 4 of this album you're going to see. This is the original Australian pressing of Damate's Cocktail. Okay? Now, in the UK, well, what happened worldwide, nationally? Harvest went and said, okay, we have 2 albums we got to deal with. We got to issue them. Well, we only really want to issue 1 album. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the best from After Hours, or things that we think are the best. By the way, could you re-record 2 songs, which they did? Take some stuff from the Australian Damate's Cocktail, and we're going to make the national, the international issue of Damate's Cocktail. This first one is the UK pressing. Different cover to this. But this would be having the same track listing that you guys all around the world would have. This is the inner sleeve for that. This came from England. EMI as well, but this is not EMI Australia. So this would be the album that we're used to. America gets a hold of it. Make sure I got the American press here. Yeah, I believe this is the American pressing here on same cover. You've seen this before. Looks like the Australian album with this Harvest thing right here in the corner. Inner sleeve. Yeah, you've seen it. But on Harvest, this is the US. Okay, upside down, but that's mine. Now, we've seen 3 copies of this. Australia said, hey, you know, we kind of like that Americanized version or worldwide version. Could we have that too? So what you get is, this is an Australian pressing of that international set list. The way you can tell the difference is this has the Harvest thing, same inner sleeve, but it is on EMI Australia. Are you confused yet? So we'll put this back in here. We'll get to one more copy of After Hours. Remember that album? That came out before this one. There's a reason that I saved it. Here we go. This is an 80s pressing of After Hours in America. Now, what they did is they said, well, there's some leftover tracks that weren't used from Diamond T's Cocktail and After Hours on the international version. Well, let's put them out on an album here in America. This was early 80s, mid 80s. This is the label. This is a Capitol reissue label. Green one, you remember that one, guys? Right. So basically you get all the tracks finally issued in America from those two albums, but it took a while. Next LP. My favorite, if you're going to get a Little River Band LP other than a best of or collection, this is probably the one you want to get to start off with, this personal opinion. But I absolutely love this album. Some wrinkling in the cover, but I'm just happy to get this. This is the Australian pressing of Sleeper Catcher, which I just learned from when I got this. It's EMI Australia again. Is that the track listing, even though the same songs are on the American and on the international and in the Australian pressing of this, the songs are the same, they're just in different order. I don't know why. I prefer the Americanized. Also, coloring, same coloring, but a little bit darker on this one. I'll show you the difference in the back. It really shows Australian and American. You can see a difference in color, I think, if I'm doing this correctly. Yeah, you can. More than likely, see? Anyway, American version of this LP. Oops. On Harvest. We'll pull this out. This has got the, this is the inner sleeve. I'll show you that. And again, Harvest. I'm not going to show you. It's the same Harvest label. Fantastic record for them. In Australia, in 1978, they get their first best of. It's a long way there. Greatest hits. This is their first. Love the inside of that. What a great cover. On EMI Australia. Don't need to show you that. A good album of Australian singles, because the singles in Australia weren't the same, some of them, as they were here in America. This next one we go to Canada for. This is a really exciting cover, isn't it, kids? Look at that. Oh, but what's inside is really kind of cool. It's on the Harvest record label, but this is a radio show sent by this record label to Canada that was helping promoting the Little River Band in 1978. So it had tracks plus commentary by the band. It's only in Canada for this. Okay, next album, we're going to, I'll show you the Australian pressing of this again. 1979, they switched over worldwide from EMI and Harvest to Capitol. First Under the Wire with Lonesome Loser and Cool Change and Not Any Wonder. Now this I find really interesting. I want to show you guys this because I've never seen this before. Check out this Capitol label. It's red. I'm thinking this is the original. However, Australian pressing. However, this may be an Australian reissue. Again, if you've got any information about any of these questions, please put it in the comments section. I really would love to know answers to some of these questions. Is this an original pressing? I think it is. It doesn't have a barcode or anything on it. I just find it interesting that that's the Capitol 79 for Australia. This is the American pressing, and I was going to make a point. You can find the Little River Band albums really cheaply. This is like my third copy of this. I've burned through so many of them. $1 at my local record boutique. Inner sleeve on this. I'll pull it out for you quickly. There you go. First Under the Wire. Capitol in the U.S. That's what that album looked like. You know that label, don't you guys? Again, same track listing this time. There's no track listing variations or anything on the Australian or American album. Okay, very interesting. Now we're going to get into, like I said, Little River Band members were in a lot of other bands prior to Little River Band that were very successful in Australia. These were released. these albums, basically chronicling some of the stuff that was on earlier stuff. There's two of them actually. There's that one and that one. Different covers around the world. These are the American. I'll show you the. Here you go. Capital. You know the Capital. These are not bad. They're very interesting. Why I like these is because it's a nice little snapshot of mid to late 60s, early 70s Australian pop music that we didn't get here in America. Okay. Moving on. I'm trying. I'm sorry. This is taking a long time. In Australia, in January, February of 1980, they released an album called Backstage Pass. It was a single album. Then, halfway through the year, they released an album called Live in America. Single albums. Well, a little later than that, a little later in the year 1980, internationally, they put both albums into one package, and they released it as the album Backstage Pass. And this is the live LP of that. And I'll be honest with you, I'll show you the label, same thing. Isn't that neat? When this first came out and I first got it back in 80, 81, I was a little irritated because there's not a lot of hits on this album. I'm like, oh man, they didn't put Lonesome Loser, they didn't put, I was irritated about that. I appreciate that. I've really come to really love this album. It's a really nicely done album. I don't have the original Australian pressings yet. I'm working on it. Okay, go back to Australia for this one. 1981, an album produced by George Martin. George Beatles, but time exposure. Band was having some issues at this point in time. They'd always had personnel issues. Really getting dicey at this point. The Australian Capital looks like that. No track listing difference on this compared to the international version. A really good album by the boys. I try to get these back in the paper sleeve here. I apologize. In the American pressing of it, basically the same. And American Capital, which basically is the same thing. 1981, Glenn Sharrock, who was one of the singers in the band. I guess you could call him the main lead singer, but there were other members of the band that had sang too. He left. They got a guy named John Farnham. Am I saying that right? I hope I'm saying it. He's a great vocalist. So they basically introduced him to the rest of the world on their greatest hits LP. 2 new songs on here. The Other Guy and Down on the Border he sang on. This one doesn't have the original. There was a kind of a plastic Capital, really a purple Capital inner sleeve when this originally came out. And this is typical Capital. A nice collection of their hits. Sold millions of copies here. I think it went double platinum here in America. Good album from them. 1982, I believe this was. Our next one, with John Farnham. Is that Farnham? Hopefully I'm saying his name right. The Net. We're getting into the period now where I don't mind them as much. I think it has a little bit to do with the fact that I'm not as big of a fan of 80s music as I am of 70s music overall. And this was getting into 80s kind of that 80s sound. Not knocking it, it's just not my favorite. This is Capital, Australian press. This next one, same album, the American press, same inner sleeve, but the interesting thing about this, just for the sake of showing it, is this. It's actually a second press of that. It's the almost looks like the old '60s Rainbow Band Capitol. Yeah, that was what, 74 to the end, 84, I mean, to the end of Capitol's pressings of vinyl in the 80s. Playing to Win, the next LP. At this point, very keyboard oriented. This is a promo pressing of it. Inner sleeve. Most of the original members at this particular point in time, with the exception of Graham Goebbels, was gone. There's your label. And at this point in time as well in America, the Little River Band was not doing as well commercially. This is No Range, 1986. This is another promotional pressing of this LP. On the Capitol. And the last album I'm going to show you, as you all have a collective sigh of relief, it has how long this has been. 1988, some of the members of the band got back together. They got Glenn Shuruk back on lead vocals and put out a few albums by him. This was the first one. The album Monsoon. Great song on here, Love is a Bridge. This is a promotional copy as well. On actually, at this particular point in time, they had switched labels. They were on MCA. This album and the album Get Lucky, which came out in 1990, were issued on CD format as an album called Worldwide Love. None of which did very well. Good stuff, though. Okay, I've taken way too long. Again, thank you so much for watching these things. If you have any answers to the questions that I've thrown out, please put them in the comments or whatever. And hopefully this will get you interested in the Little River Band. They're soft rock for the most part, but a great band. And hopefully for those of you who are big LRB fans, this was a big treat for you. Alrighty, until next time, everybody, like I always say, peace and love.